Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 122 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Ansel Adams, the great photographer Ansel Adams, once said, "There is nothing worse than a sharp photograph of a fuzzy idea." And the great manipulative photographer Jerry Uelsmann once said that while you can memorize the dictionary, it doesn't mean you have anything to say afterwards. I've always loved that one, too. A little less well-known than Ansel's quote. And, of course, what they're talking about is that craft is not content. Our vocabulary isn't the thing that we really know to say. Our vocabulary is really just the mechanism by which we can say something. And sort of tagging along to the previous episode of Camera Position where we were talking about post-production and when manipulation begins, and my basic theory that photography is really about the real world only if the real world is always seen through the lens of a camera, with all of the mechanism that camera lenses and camera seeing has to do with everything. I thought it might be worth talking a little bit about the difference between craft and content and the way in which we think about photography. Now, one of the things that I've noticed as the digital revolution has occurred, and I think almost all of us, whether we came to photography during the digital revolution or perhaps more especially for those of us who were in photography before the digital revolution, we have noticed this amazing influx of photographers. And they are everywhere. Everybody has a camera. And of course, you know, the another old adage that just because you buy a piano doesn't make you a concert pianist. Just because you buy a camera doesn't necessarily make you a photographer. But what these cameras have in common is their ability to give remarkably good results much of the time, even maybe most of the time, to most people. And of course, it is really the thing that differentiates the photographers whose work we are interested in from the photographers whose work we are less interested in is the content, the stuff that is inside the frame, the stuff that is really inside the photographer's head. And I think one of the things that's happened with this digital revolution is that problem of a lot of people coming to photography wanting to be photographers, but not really knowing exactly how to go about saying the things that they want to say. And of course, what they end up doing, many of them, not all of them certainly, but many of them wind up kind of taking refuge in their equipment, in their gear. So what do we have? We have whole websites devoted to pixel peeping, this idea of looking at your images on a one-to-one level on the computer monitor to tell which lens is sharper or which camera has better resolution or which process, which filter is going to deliver the better sharpening result. And of course, this is not new. We had this back in the analog era. What did we call those guys back then? What do we call them? Grain sniffers. You remember, some of you will remember the grain sniffers, those people who would look nose to glass at the prints in an exhibition to see if the photographer had accurately captured the scene with the minimum amount of grain, the maximum amount of sharpness, so forth and so on. So these concepts are not new, of falling back on our equipment to sort of make us feel better about the way in which photography is practiced by knowing something. We know this thing about the camera, this camera better, this camera worse. But really, I would posit that the thing that makes photography interesting to most all of us, and I think the thing that makes photography interesting to the world that really looks at and cares about photography, is not the gear, not the stuff. It's the stuff that's in the frame, the stuff that's in your head. And of course, one of the things that I have long advocated, and I think regular listeners would agree with this, that I have long advocated the idea of looking at the world around you, the other things you're interested in, whether it's music or poetry or theater or the natural world or the way sunlight falls through the windows in your house. Those are the things that actually kind of make the difference between what is successful for you as a photographic subject and what is less successful for you as a photographic subject. the things that you can bring to the camera before you actually raise the camera to your eye are in many ways just as important or more important than, going out and thinking about what it is that you can find to photograph. And even though I would call myself a discovery photographer, somebody who walks around looking for the things that I might find interesting as a photograph, I really think that for many of us, it is the stuff that we bring to the experience of photographing, which is why I'd really, really advocate reading lots of books, thinking about the way the world looks in a bigger way, looking at other kinds of art, looking at paintings, looking at drawings, looking at motion pictures, and seeing how photographers use light, how photographers use framing, how painters use light, how painters use framing to inform the way we can make our own photographs. So rather than being a pixel peeper or a grain sniffer, try to think about the way in which you're thinking through the process of making photographs for yourself. And as I've said many, many times, I think making photographs that are interesting to you ends up making photographs that are interesting to others. It is your interest in the subject, your interest in the process of what it is that you're doing in your head relative to your photography that will ultimately make the pictures successful on a deeper and more comprehensive level. So start thinking about tucking that equipment into the back of your pocket, not thinking so much about the way the equipment works, how things work photographically in terms of the technology. I mean, I really think that the technology of photography is something that we can all learn fairly quickly, fairly rapidly, and get on with it. Get on with thinking about what goes into the frame, how we're speaking, what it is that we're saying, and working toward the idea of a group of images that say something cohesive and comprehensive for ourselves. I'd like to make another little pause here and talk about something that's probably more applicable to those of you who live in the Chicago area, like I do, or in the Midwest, certainly within a stone's throw of Chicago. March 7th through 10th of 2013, the annual Society for Photographic Education Conference is being held in Chicago. And I know that many of you are not educators, although I think some of you probably are photo educators. But if you are not a photo educator and you are interested in a conference where 95% of the content is about the ideas behind photography and much less about the mechanics of photography, this conference is a terrific one. It is obviously intended for photographic educators and photo students. About 2/3 or so of the people who will attend will be photo educators, and the other third will be photo students from literally all around the country, all around the world in some cases. And they will all converge on Chicago for a few days to participate in a conference where we talk about the ideas of photography. The theme for this year's conference is Conferring Significance, Celebrating Photography's Continuum. And that's a theme that I put together because I'm the conference chair for this conference. So I'm especially excited because I've had a pretty heavy hand in putting together the content of the conference, most specifically the major speakers that we have. So here's the rundown of the major speakers. Keynote speakers Martin Parr, also Richard Misrak, and the great South African photographer Zwelethu Matetwa will be our three major keynote speakers, and they'll be joined by invited speakers Mona Kuhn and Olivia Parker, and then we'll also have a great invited speaker, John Upton, who some of you may know as one of the authors of one of the most important photo textbooks of all time. And he'll be talking about the early photographic education world in the 1960s in California. So this is a tremendous opportunity for any of you who live in or around the Chicago area, and I'll put a link to SPE.org, the SPEnational.org, pardon me. I'll put a link to SPEnational.org on the Camera Position blog and also in the app. And also in the app this week, and I'll also put a link on the blog, but there will be a link to a little video piece that I put together recently that kind of talks about this basic idea that I was talking about earlier in the podcast about the concept versus the materials. What it is that you can do with an idea and move that idea forward into a finished photographic piece. So I put a video together that includes both motion capture and still capture and sound as well. So take a look and see what you think, and let me know what you think. Thanks for being here, and I hope to see some of you in Chicago at the SPE conference in March, and I hope to see the rest of you back here on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.